All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Tuesday, November 19th, and this is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. You are listening to All In Horns. And today's episode, we've got a big day for you. We're going to give our final thoughts on the Texas-Arkansas game and where we move from here. Texas recruiting news, we're going to dive into that. And also, Steve Sarkisian met with the media on his weekly Monday scheduled press conference, and we will discuss what he talked about in that press conference yesterday. And so, Jake, we will start off with our kind of final thoughts, wrapping up the Texas-Arkansas game a little bit as we move forward. A lot of discussion and games resulted in a big shift in what the college football playoffs are going to look like. We won't necessarily dive too much into the national scale thing. We just have so much to talk about when it comes to the Longhorns today. But again, one thing affects the other. And so, Jake, I will go ahead and let you start. And then I've got a little something that might turn the perspective of what Texas fans feel and think about Quinn Ewers moving forward. So, Jake, go ahead and get into your final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, going back and watching the game definitely gave me a little bit of a different perspective than right after, just like it always does. I still share some of my criticisms of Quinn, but at the same time, I now want to step back because, as always, social media has a way of
humbling
me into feeling like I'm part of the problem. Because I feel like it's fair to criticize Quinn Ewers' play. He is not playing up to what we know he can play to, but at the same time, I'm not saying to bench him this year for Arch Manning. I do not think that benching him for Arch Manning would make the Longhorns a better team right now. It would not make them a better contender for winning the national title. This team will win or lose a national title this year with Quinn Ewers at the helm, and that's how it should be. I've just seen a whole lot of people thinking that it's ridiculous he's starting, and I think that's too far. I think there's a fine line between, and at the same time, there's people who like, you can't criticize him because of X, Y. He's brought us back. He has a great record. His stats aren't bad. And it's like, there's a fine line between those two extremes to me, to where you can criticize his play, but just because you're criticizing his play doesn't mean you're joining all the idiots saying he should be benched immediately. And that's definitely not what I'm saying. Because at the end of the day, one of the most important things from that Arkansas game, and we ended our reaction show kind of on this note, was they didn't turn over the ball. Arkansas did. That was the difference in the game.
Yeah.
Not turning over the ball in a road environment like that, in a game that's close, and your defense is playing really well, that can be winning quarterback play to a point. He was a little bit more of a game manager, if anything, in Saturday's game. Yep. From a standpoint of his completion percentage wasn't bad. He just didn't hit any deep shots. And to be fair to him, there was probably 4 or 5 drops. Gunnar Helm committed 2 or 3 of those, which is just not something you see often. So I just kind of wanted to start my initial thoughts out on Quinn Ewers, because it's been such a hot button topic. And going back and listening to our episode Saturday, I was like, man, it almost sounds like we're on that side of like, Quinn shouldn't be starting. He's not the better quarterback on this roster. And that's not how I feel, at least. And I don't think that's how you feel either. I'll let you speak to that. And I'll kind of let you run with that. Then I'll give some of my other thoughts on the rest of the offense and the defense.
So just real quickly, here's a team perspective as to how well Texas actually did play. Jahdae Barrett, co-defensive player of the week in the SEC. Alfred Collins, SEC defensive lineman of the week. And Hayden Connor is the SEC co-offensive player of the week in the SEC. That would be the 4th SEC offensive lineman of the week for the Texas Longhorns through this season. So as a team perspective, chill out. We're fine. We're doing all right.
By 4 different linemen, by the way.
We're doing okay. One of my favorite things, Jake, is that great teams find bad ways to win. That's just something I've always said. Great teams find bad ways to win. You can play your C game, your D game, and guess what? At the end of the day, You get a win in the win column. And that's really, at the end of the day, all that matters. I will never apologize, no matter how ugly or sloppy a win is. I'll never apologize for it. Great teams win even whenever they're not playing their best game. I actually kind of feel good about this game because of that. However, I will say this. I think as a Texas fan base, you and I are guilty of it. I think the media is guilty of it. I think everybody's expectations, key word there, expectations for the season of what the identity of this team was going to be to have success. And it's the identity of the team that Steve Sarkisian has had in the past, which is high-powered offense, scoring 30, 35, 40 points a game, and just running the team as an offensive identity team through the air, big plays, fun, exciting, schematic play designs, things of that nature. All right. And we're guilty of it. You and I were guilty of it. I think the fan base was guilty of it. The national media, the local media was all kind of honed in on Sarkisian's offense, Sarkisian's offense, Sarkisian's offense. Guess what? The identity of this team is not offensively. It's a defensive team. And if we switch our mindset to this is a defensive first team and we rely and lean on the defense to win us football games, we're going to enjoy ourselves as football fans a lot more, because I've kind of made that switch. And I think it's really going to help a lot of people understand that you can only be let down by your own expectations of something when those expectations don't live up to it, because that's something that you've set in your own head. That's nothing to do with the team or the success of a football team. And so this is the identity of this team is not Quinn Ewers having to lead this team with just Heisman caliber quarterback play. And something that I wanted to, in terms of putting into perspective what Quinn Ewers is doing and what he's capable of doing, is championship winning football. By the way, he can win a championship the exact way that he's playing right now, or at least the exact way that he played in Arkansas, not the way he played in Georgia, because guess what he did against Georgia, Jake? He turned the ball over. That's something he cannot afford to do in Texas, have success moving forward. However, something that I want to put into perspective is I want to compare what the last 3 championship winning quarterback seasons looked like in the NCAA. And that goes back to 2021, Stetson Bennett, his junior year at Georgia, and then 2022, his senior year at Georgia, and then what J.J. McCarthy did for Michigan a season ago, and compare that to what the projected 16-game season would look like for Quinn Ewers. That would mean winning a national championship, or at least playing in a national championship. Quinn also missed 2 games, so really it's a 13.5 game comparison to what these quarterbacks have played a 15-game season in. So again, a little bit of compare and contrast, a little bit of perspective there. In terms of completions in a full slated national championship winning season of what Quinn is projected to do, remember, this is a projected stats, Quinn would be second in the last 4 seasons in terms of completions throughout a season of the last 3 winning national championship quarterbacks, with 272 completions, 391 attempts, which is good for a 68 completion percentage, which would also put him at second highest compared to those other quarterbacks in the last 3 seasons. He would finish with 3,038 yards, also second only to the 2022 Stetson Bennett, who had 4,128 yards. The other 2 quarterbacks finished within the 2,000-yard range. And then in terms of touchdowns, Quinn Ewers is projected to have more touchdowns thrown than Stetson Bennett both years that he won a national championship, and J.J. McCarthy with 33 touchdowns. The other 2 quarterbacks didn't even get over 30 touchdowns in a single season when they won their national championships. The only thing Quinn Ewers finished last in when it came to completions, attempts, yards, completion percentage, touchdowns was interceptions. He's on pace for about 10 interceptions. Again, that can be cleaned up and just taken away completely out of his game. He's done much better than that here as of late. But J.J. McCarthy threw 4 picks. Stetson Bennett threw 7 picks. We never wanted to think of Quinn Ewers as a Stetson Bennett or a J.J. McCarthy type quarterback. That was just never what we wanted him to be. We wanted him to be Colt McCoy, Vince Young, Heisman caliber guy who's going to be the face and name of when you think Texas football winning a national championship, that it was led by a great quarterback season. That might not just be the issue. That might not just be the case. That might not happen. But this team can still win a championship with the caliber of defense that it's playing at, with Quinn Ewers at the helm.
Yeah, and that really does put things into perspective. Just like going back and watching the game puts things into perspective. And I think part of it is just like you said, the expectations have set unrealistic goals in some ways. And that being with how the reactions are on a drive to drive basis, you would think every drive is almost deciding the game. And it's like we have a defense who's never going to get a stop. And and like you said, that's just not the case. This is a defensive first football team with an offense that's still been pretty damn good in almost every game this season.
Here's the best part about everything that I just said. We've seen Quinn play at a level of a Heisman caliber. And if he does that for a stretch of games in the postseason, this team is the hardest team to beat in the country.
Yeah, if he plays at a top level, only Oregon is a team that I would put in the same tier where they could go out, and that's a lot because of Dylan Gabriel, who's also in his 10th year. So that helps at the quarterback position. But Quinn does need to play a little bit better than he did against Arkansas, but he can, and we know he can. And you just got to still have some belief, because just throwing an Arch Manning, not that Steve Sarkisian is smarter than the average Twitter user. Thank goodness. Yeah, he would not do that. And also, I think Sarkisian's starting to show that he's going to be willing to lean on the run game a little bit more as the season goes on. I thought they did a better job of running the ball, at least calling more runs in that game, and running the ball fairly successfully. Wisner did. I agree with your sentiments that Wisner really struggled a lot. I thought he missed a lot of chances to cut back into a hole, be a little bit more patient, and that sometimes was too hesitant. He was just a little bit all over the place. He didn't have that confident look that he normally does when he was running it. And then Gibson coming along as well. I think you could see him get more carries, especially in short yardage situations. And then those extensions of the run game. I have to give Steve Sarkisian a lot of credit in the sense of, I think he obviously understands where Quinn's shortcomings are. That doesn't mean he's not going to try to throw the ball deep, because Quinn can hit those sometimes. But he's pretty good about adjusting. When those aren't hitting, he will start calling more swing passes, more intermediate type stuff, and more screens. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But the offense is a little bit limited when Quinn is having a game where he's struggling. When he's not, it's Florida. It's the Florida game. It's the Michigan game. And Florida has a pretty decent defense, by the way. They just beat LSU, by the way, folks. And you can't just tell me.
Talk about it, Jake. Talk about it. Give yourself a little pat on the back real quick.
Yeah. Who's been calling LSU frauds since they were like 6-1? This guy right here. I have. They are frauds. And
sound the alarm. Sound the alarm.
They proved they were frauds. They proved it against A&M. They proved it even more. If anything, I might have been slightly wrong on Mizzou. They might not be totally fraudulent, at least compared to an LSU. I would favor Mizzou to beat LSU if Brady Cook is in at quarterback. They played pretty darn well against South Carolina, who I do respect a lot. So LSU's fraudulent. They're lucky to have that South Carolina win where the officials were clearly paid a lot of money by Brian Kelly to make sure that they did not lose that game, because they should have lost that game by 2 possessions if it wasn't for fixed officiating in that game. And so, just LSU fraudulent. Just had to get that out of the way.
Quick sidebar.
And I don't care. By the way, I don't care. I saw people going, I would have liked to seen Texas play this team with DJ Lagway in. Does DJ Lagway play defense? Because Texas scored 35 points in the first half. They scored 5 touchdowns on 7 possessions.
I don't think DJ Lagway is a 6 to 7 touchdown difference for that Florida team. I'm sorry.
Against this Texas defense?
No, not even.
Who just held close. Arkansas to 230 yards of offense when Arkansas, even in games they've lost, offense has not been the issue.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't have been close. Jake, in terms of the final thoughts on Arkansas, the game itself, I am okay with the idea of making this Texas team, switching the identity a little bit to, they can win ugly games. They can win sloppy games, and that's okay. It's okay to play those games and be able to win those games.
Was this even a bad win? It's a 10-point win on the road. How many seconds did they trail in this game, Tanner? How many seconds?
Quick, 0 seconds. They trailed for 0 seconds. Also, they're the only SEC team to be undefeated on the road this year.
There's a little bit of a caveat to that.
Sure, doesn't matter. They are the only team to be in the conference. And Sark mentions it in his press conference of, hey, it is hard to do in this conference to go week in, week out. Kentucky beat Ole Miss on the road. I mean, this is a week to week league. This is a week to week sport that we play in. So for Texas to go in and win every single road game this year it's impressive nonetheless. Yes, I don't care about who they've played on the road. That's fine. Whatever. You can mention it all
This
you
was
want.
their
But
first true road game since Michigan. I have to caveat that because you have to be fair with the argument. If they beat A&M, then I mean, this season, assuming they can take care of a Kentucky, then the season as a whole is nothing but a success at that point because you'd be going to an SEC title game. And just real quick, because I was looking at Arkansas, just kind of their games throughout the season, and that was by far their worst offensive game. It wasn't even close. Their next worst game was at Auburn, where they had 334 yards of offense. And they won that game with Auburn turning over the ball 5 times.
Yeah.
Even against Tennessee, where they only scored 19 points, they had 431 yards of offense and 23 first downs. They just couldn't finish drives in that game. They were moving the ball consistently. They didn't do jack squat against this Texas defense.
And is it fair to say that Tennessee probably has the second best defense in the conference? Top 3?
I think they do without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, Ole Miss maybe, but I mean,
Ole Miss is playing. They're just playing really, really good football right now. Ole Miss is.
Yeah, and they also just gave up. Granted, a lot of that was in the second half, but they still gave up 500 yards of offense to Arkansas in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, I would put Tennessee 2, Ole Miss 3 as far as defenses go. Georgia.
And Bama's now that Bama's a scary team, but let's not get too much into the weeds of who's a contender in the SEC and whatnot. Let's go ahead and move forward. Jake, let's talk a little bit about Sark's presser. Just real quick, a couple things I wanted to shout out was he made it a point to talk about Kentucky and the success that they've had in their toughest games. Now, they have not had a great season, but Coach Stoops gets this Kentucky team ready to play against its top competition. Against Georgia, they lost by 1 early in the season. They go on the road and beat Ole Miss a week or two later after that. They played Tennessee very tough. It was not a close game, but they played them tough. And Sark went out and said, this is the most important game of your season. And he was definitely trying to send a message to the Texas team that do not sleepwalk through this game. Do not come in here overconfident, because this Kentucky team can hang with you, and they will hang with you, and they will ruin senior night for the Longhorns, or senior day, however you want to say it. But he made it a point that you need to respect this Kentucky team moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so clearly a look ahead, and we talked about that. I picked them to lose to Kentucky at the start of the season.
This was a trap game for you very early on.
I have backed off of that. I don't see Kentucky scoring enough points to win against this defense with that offense. But you never know. Like you've said, it's such a week to week league, and Kentucky has proven when they play their best football, they can beat anyone. I mean, beating Ole Miss on the road, nearly beating Georgia, competitive against Tennessee, like you mentioned. I believe they were up for at least a decent amount in that game. So and that was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so they're certainly capable. And with just winning a big game on the road at Arkansas, in a very tough environment. And then you got A&M next week. That might be the biggest game in the history of that rivalry, because A&M hasn't been in a position like this since 1938. And so it's such an easy point where you're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids. Yeah, I'd say it's safe to say they could very easily overlook this Kentucky team. But I think Sarkisian's typically pretty good about getting the players up for that. They could have overlooked Florida. They could have overlooked many teams on this schedule. And they really haven't had a game like that. Some people would say Vanderbilt. I would say Texas almost beat themselves in that game. It wasn't that they overlooked Vandy. It was that they tried to beat themselves. And so Kentucky is a physical team, and the defense I think should roll, but the offense is going to have to play well to move the ball on this Kentucky defense, because they're certainly a very capable defense, and they've shown that they can stop some of the best offenses in college football.
And then Sark also mentioned that this senior class, it is senior day for the Longhorns. And even if you want to look at it this way, possibly and probably Quinn Ewers' last game. Now, they did ask him if he thought it was going to be Quinn Ewers' final game as a Texas Longhorn in Austin. He didn't really comment on it. He just kind of said, look, I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it. He's not a senior. That's all he can really say, And so, but this is a unique class for Sark in particular, because this is his 4th year as the Texas Longhorns head coach. He brought some of these guys in, but a lot of these guys had committed before he was announced. Gunnar Helm, he called out by name. Barron Sorrell, he called out by name, that was already committed before Sark was hired. Some of these guys stayed through the hiring process, and that was the first time he was able to kind of start shaping this culture the way he saw it, and the way he saw it best fit. And then even after year 1, those guys could have transferred out and said, this is just not going to work out. You went through some tough times. You figured it out year 2. And then year 3, obviously the results started to show. And so he said he himself as a coach has been able to grow with this recruiting class graduating and leaving Austin. And so I think this is a little bit more of a special senior day, even for Sark, than most years, I think.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these guys, he's coached their whole career. Not just a year or two, or just these are guys transfers. There we go. That's what I was looking for. These are guys that he's brought in that have helped him change the culture, that have not only he's coached them through their whole career, but they have helped him make his career at Texas. They have helped make the culture at Texas what it is now, and they have helped take what was a losing program into a winning program. And that's a big deal. And I guarantee you that's a big deal for Sarkisian, especially after he signed that big extension this last offseason. A lot of these players made that extension for him at the end of the day. The credit goes both ways. It goes to Sarkisian because he's been the only one who's been able to do it since Mac Brown. And the credit goes to a lot of these players who stuck through the hard times.
John Barron, another perfect example.
A lot of these guys graduating, it's not like when you're at Alabama for the last 15 years or whatever, where you went 4 years and you won 3 national championships. These are guys who stuck through bad seasons. One really bad season,
yeah.
And then one mediocre season for what expectations would be at Texas, and then 2 seasons of returning to where Texas should be, which is at the top of the college football world, in the sense of the top tier. I'm not saying they're the best team in the country last 2 years. But being in that nature being in that tier where you have the ability to compete for a national title. That's what I expect of Texas. I don't expect to win a national title every other year or anything crazy, but I do expect Texas to be a 9 to 10 win team at worst.
Yeah.
Because they've shown they can do that consistently as a program.
No, 100%. And Jake, before we get going, speaking of the culture shift and really bad years, just quick little tidbit of previous Longhorn news. Tom Herman was recently fired. In fact, he was fired Monday from FAU after 2 seasons there, and I think they're like a 4-win team this year. So not great in terms of the track record between the previous regimes and Charlie Strong and Tom Herman, and their even post-Texas tenures at wherever it is that they were let go and fired from. So be thankful that we've got Sark. That's all I got to say to the fans. Like, just know what we have right now and love him for everything that he is.
Yeah, and stop. One thing that drives me nuts and I've been guilty of it maybe in a private text between us, but I think that's different between putting out in the public. And this goes not only to Sark, but to a lot of coaches and just a lot of football in general, is when there's one play call you disagree with in a game and just going, what a terrible play call, and just like being upset about that for the rest of the game, and then being like, he didn't even call that good of a game, when I don't think Sarkisian's necessarily ever just called a terrible game. There's always going to be calls you can nitpick, but that's football. They may see something pre-snap that you don't see. It may be a check at the line. It's just one little thing that drives me nuts because it's so easy. I with social media and everything, I think things become such a play-to-play instant reaction that it just makes not stepping back and looking at the game as a whole, which is something I'm going to try to do better of when watching the game live, because I found it easier when I was at the game in person.
Emotions just get the best of you, man, and we're all guilty of it.
I went off on you Saturday a little bit because you were I was at the game. I'm staying off socials, and then I got your ass texting me the most negative stuff. You're about to witness a field storming. What is that called? This team sucks. This offense is pissing me off. This offense sucks, and all this stuff. And I've done.
I said Quinn, not the offense. I said Quinn sucks, and this game is pissing me, or the offense is pissing me off in this game.
And to be fair to you, I have done the same exact thing to you. Yeah. I am not saying I am not guilty of it too. But
in the game, I feel like in game we should be pardoned from all comments.
True, but I'm just saying it from a perspective of is the first Texas game I've been to in a couple years, and the first game I've been to when we've been doing this podcast, and being off my phone for most of that game. I wasn't panicking. Almost the only point where I really got nervous was when Arkansas cut it to 3. But other than that, I was pretty calm most of the game. And I don't know why. I think it's just that being off of the phone, being detached from everyone overreacting, and just being at the game and kind of feeling the momentum that like Texas still had control the majority of the time allowed me to take a little bit more of a step back. So I'm going to try to do that. But that said, if Texas goes down 7-0 against Texas A&M next weekend, I'm going to be full suicide watch. I mean, I also know myself well enough to know that ahead of time.
And we can call each other out on it and have a good time with it. Lastly, on the Sark Presser, before we get into Texas recruiting news and a little bit of women's basketball injury updates. Jaden Blue was seen in a sling following the game. Sark said that was more so kind of a precautionary, just kind of watching an upper body injury. Sark is hopeful for Jaden Blue to be playing against Kentucky. He did have a full practice. Now, in terms of contact and how active he was, there's no way of us knowing that, but did say he did practice and he's hopeful for Saturday. DeAndre Moore, we thought maybe it was a hip. It actually ended up being a foot injury. He was limited in practice, did participate in practice, but limited. Sark said that he is anticipating on having both. Do we know what anticipating on having both available on Saturday means? Is that hopeful? Is that probable? Is that doubtful? Is that likely? I don't know what anticipating means, but that is the word that he used.
It means hoping. It sounds a lot more positive on Blue. I would honestly be surprised just based, I got to see DeAndre Moore on the sidelines trying to work it out. And it didn't look good. It didn't look terrible, but it just didn't look good when you think about him playing a week from that injury. Jaden Blue, I never saw anything. Hopefully him being in a sling is precautionary because, man, Texas, it cannot. Every time someone gets the hot hand at running back, they get hurt. I mean, that's been the whole year. Jaden Blue looks really good. He gets hurt. Wisner looks really good. He gets hurt. Gibson looks really good. He gets hurt. It's just anytime you see someone start to get where it's like maybe he's RB1 right now, he gets hurt and then he's shaken up and then he tries to play and then he doesn't play as good. And then people go, maybe he's not RB1. And it's like a cycle. And Texas needs these running backs in these last 2 games, and then potentially an SEC title game and potentially, hopefully, playoffs at the least. And that's going to be very important to watch moving forward.
I think if you make an SEC championship, which right now Texas and Alabama, if both teams win out, would meet in the SEC title game, it would be those 2 teams at this current moment in time with the rest of their schedules. That would be the matchup. Texas getting that bye week, I think really at any point, both teams getting that bye week for the playoffs, huge. Just huge. Before we move forward, Jake, you have recruiting news. I'm going to have you just kind of run down the gauntlet roulette that you've got kind of taken notes on, and I'm going to let you take the floor.
Yeah. First off, I want to follow up on your SEC title game mention. We talked about how important that bye week would be in the preseason. I think that's really going to show itself in this year when you have a anyone can be anyone type season. Not having to play an extra game is going to be pivotal. I think the national champion will come from one of those buys in this season. And then
it might be the next 3-4 seasons.
I really hope Texas can get to the SEC title game and play Bama, because I think Texas would smoke Bama. Just calling my shot now.
Okay.
I don't think it would be competitive.
Babe Ruth in the corner over there. All right.
All right. Football recruiting. We had mentioned Jamie French was visiting Florida. It wasn't anything to be concerned about. It's something to pay attention to. I wouldn't say worry about yet, but the panic button's not in the closet. I see where it is. The case is closed. Not opening it and pressing it yet. But there is some noise there that he is a Florida kid. They pushed that, but at the same time, the fact he didn't just flip right away and there's no signs that like he feels like he should go to Florida right after that is a good sign. You're going to have the most momentum in a recruitment following a visit. So just something to keep tabs of. Myron Charles, the 4-star defensive tackle for Texas, he also visited Florida. Doesn't seem like there was much movement there. Sounds like Texas is pretty confident there, so hopefully that holds up. An RPM prediction on 3 was put in for Joseph Mabachu to commit to Texas. He is a 4-star defensive tackle. And that is obviously a position where Texas really would like to get a couple more guys in the fold. So hopefully that one does come to fruition, because that would be a big one. Probably the biggest news on this whole list. There are rumblings that Michael Fasusi, the 5-star offensive tackle commit to Oklahoma, might be visiting Texas this weekend. Texas has been pursuing this recruitment steadily since he committed. They have really started to press on it recently. I think that with OU's issues that they've had, with Texas being able to compete with any NIL offer, which supposedly is a big part of this commitment, and then early playing time was another big part, and he would at least be able to come in and compete for a job next year, because I think both tackles are gone after this season. So that's a big one to keep track of. If he visits Texas this weekend, and the visit goes well, that will be one that we are very closely watching, because that would be big. And then just some ones to keep an eye on that where Texas are trying to make a flip. Kobe Sellers, 4-star cornerback commitment to A&M. Texas is still talking to him regularly. Chase Sims, the 4-star defensive tackle, he is also an A&M commit, if I remember correctly. Texas still in talks with him at least several times a week, if not daily. And then Zion Williams, another 4-star defensive tackle, LSU commit this time. Texas is still pushing heavily here. Big reason he flipped to LSU was Bo Davis. Kenny Baker's had some time to build a relationship there. I do think Texas is going to flip at least one of these guys I mentioned, if not two. And hopefully, if I had to choose, it would be one of the defensive tackles, because that's probably the biggest need left in the class.
Yeah. And then obviously they are going to send full speed ahead on the tackle. So,
yeah.
All right, Jake, that is going to wrap up Texas recruiting. Just real quickly, before we let everybody go, some news over the weekend that happened on Sunday. Women's basketball beats DePaul 91-61, the number 4 team in the country. Taylor Jones had the biggest night for the Longhorns, 22 points, 12 rebounds with the height advantage. Madison Booker with 10 points, and Rory Harmon facilitating with 9 assists. Texas remains undefeated, and they are a top 5 team in the country, and they look to continue that. I think once Texas gets into SEC play for the women's, we're going to have a lot of fun watching this team match up against the LSUs and the South Carolinas of the world.
Yeah, I mean, women's basketball, we talked about it early, that this is going to be a fun team this year, and the SEC and women's basketball is pretty legit.
Yeah.
And women's basketball is a lot of fun in general at the college level. I've really enjoyed watching it the last several years. And Texas is going to be trying to compete for an SEC title. I'm not going to say they're right in the fold because South Carolina is the undoubted favorite until proven otherwise. But Texas has the talent at the least to where if they play to their full potential, they could at least push them. And so we'll get to see that as the season goes along.
All right, Jake, that's going to do it for our show today. We are going to have a very special guest for tomorrow's episode. We have Texas Longhorn legend and Hall of Famer, Philadelphia Eagle Hall of Famer, and Texas Sports Hall of Famer, Bill Bradley, joining the show tomorrow. You're going to want to tune into that. A wealth of knowledge, really essentially a little bit of history. Ran the first wishbone offense in Texas history and has been coaching since the 2019 season. So first wishbone offenses in 2019, wealth of knowledge in the middle. So we're going to get to talk to him, and we're really excited to what that interview is going to bring for you guys tomorrow. So like, share, subscribe. Also, Texas taking on Syracuse on Thursday night. We are going to have an immediate reaction episode following that for Friday's episode. So our predictions for this week's college football is going to fall on a Thursday, and then we will give you our reaction episode to the Texas-Syracuse basketball game on Friday, and then our immediate reaction of the Texas Longhorn football game on Saturday following the Kentucky game. So a little mix-up within the schedule, but a fun mix-up because, hey, more Texas sports means we get more things to talk about and things to watch to bring to you guys. And it seems like the way our numbers have gone, everyone is more responsive and interactive with the immediate reaction shows. I think if we can have more of those, we get more people supporting the channel. So like, share, subscribe. Again, we come out with these episodes Monday through Friday at noon, and then we have our immediate reactions following the games as well. For Jacob Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on Rogue Sports Network on All In Horns. Welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.